Dr. Ryan Expedition 44. I'm excited today to do a song review. I haven't been this excited about a song in a while, and you might notice that if you follow the channel closely. I haven't done a song review for a little while now. And so today I'm going to do a new song review called Your Way, and it's primarily by Daniel Doss. He's a CCM singer, songwriter, has I'll get to this, but he's into a lot of things. You might recognize him in the 2000s. He was with Sparrow Records and was producer Ed Cash. Came out with something called Greater Than Us All in 2008. And kind of went through a little time where we didn't hear a lot from him. And then around 2017, he came out with that new EP song, Praise the King. Really good stuff. A few great releases. And then he kind of, in the last few years, has broadened his horizons, gotten into studio sessions, events, songwriting, production, coaching, booking, really has his fingers in a lot of things, and he's seen a lot of success in this area. He's worked with some pretty big names over the years, award-winning songwriters, Benji Cowart, Chrissy Nordoff, Tina Turner, West, Nathan Fellingham, and then if you go back to the Praise the King years, that was also mixed by industry veteran Mark Nelson. He's worked with Fleetwood Mac and Colby Collet. There's also Grosser had her hand in that, and you might recognize her from Jesus Culture and Casting Crowns. So there's a lot of really big names here, but what I'm excited about is he started branching off by getting others a little bit more into the limelight and into the scene. And so he wrote this with two people, Audrie Mouzakis and Tami Hughson, and this is a great song. I heard it for the first time about a month ago, and then they played it in our church last week, and I tell you, it is powerful. So I want to kind of go through it a little bit. Let's jump right into the lyrics. Verse 1 says, "We don't want to do this our way. Every time we try, we realize it's all in vain. Time to realign ambitions. All of these distractions lead to senseless pain." You kind of see the vain and pain rhyme going on there. And it's a nice wordplay. You know, I talk a lot about wordplays in the Bible, and as I'm going to get to, this song has a very good feel for Old Testament writing. There's a lot of like little wordplays, reiteration, things like that. And it really works out well. I like being strategic about our relational faith. So the line on realigning our ambitions, I think that's in keeping with Psalm 37:4, which is my life verse. And I like it when songwriters and preachers get a little more strategic about living your life, planned out, purposeful, things like that. Then it takes us to the pre-chorus and says, "Take all our opinions and all that we have known." Now, I call this a hanger because it just throws out this comment, but it doesn't necessarily direct it. Kind of just leaving it up to the worshiper, the singer of this, to do what their heart and mind will. And I think that's okay that they just kind of throw this out. Now, I kind of like it because one of my things is I feel like it's a poke at westernized culture, and I poke at this a lot, that we are steeped more in tradition of following what people say is the gospel, the word, the calling, things like that, than what the Bible might actually teach or say in the root of the message. And so I think this is really well done, just to kind of put it out there and all that we've known, to kind of just rethink, recheck our thoughts. All right, so let's jump into the chorus here. It says, "When we see giants, you see victory. When we see oceans, you part the waves. When we see mountains, you make them tremble. When faced with failure, you pour out grace." Now, again, I've kind of explained that this has a feel of like, Middle Ancient Hebrew. And what I like about this is the use of opposites. Now, in Hebrew, we see a lot of words that kind of have two opposite meanings, but we also see phrases that work that way. So in English, a simple explanation is the word refrain. So you can say, "Please refrain from this," and that means stop, get away, something like that. Or a refrain is a repetition within a song. And so it's the same word, but it has kind of a different meaning. It can mean the opposite. And I see little pictures of that in the chorus here, and it's really eloquently done. That's called a polysemy in Hebrew. Now, it's always really hard for me to know what the author, singer-songwriters were really meaning, their intent on these things, and I think oftentimes I read my own theological structure into them and things like that. But I really like the chorus. I really like how they kind of have a play on these ideas of things are just big, giants, oceans, mountains. Like we just feel it's all weighing down on us, yet God, in this simple, beautiful way, is just bigger than all those things. And I think they did an amazing job kind of spelling out that story and where they want to go. All right, now you get to the tag, and I really like the tag. So it's this very flowing melody that kind of goes, we want to do it your way. Now, I think it would have been really clever if at the end of all the reiterations, they would have finished with Yahweh. It has this Old Testament feel, and if they would have finished this way, it would have really fit well with how Hebrew often addresses deity, sometimes at the end of the writing or in the reverse form or something like that. But it would have been this really neat idea of the way the tetragram derived from the triconsonantal root, which means to be, become, to come to pass. It would have had some underlying finish to the way all the song kind of comes and fits together and brings it all in under the same mindset, continuing with that kind of Old Testament pun on wordplay and fitting together like a neat, clever puzzle. But even without putting the words Yahweh in on the end there, I think your mind might take it over that way anyway, and if you're into kind of singing your own rendition of these, maybe you would do that. Now, if you can't tell, I've kind of said it a couple times, I really do like this song. I think it's a great song, but it seems like I always find parts in songs and verses that I personally, theologically, might want to do a little bit differently. And in this song, I find that in verse 2. So it says, you have always been so faithful, all your tender mercies rise up every day. You keep every word you've spoken. Help us, Lord, to always listen and obey. So I'm sure you're thinking after reading that, those sound pretty solid. What could I possibly have an issue with? Well, again, it's kind of petty. It's not a major issue here. But when you get to the first part of this, you have always been so faithful. I think for the most part, when you talk to any Christian, any worshiper, that's usually what they think, that God is incredibly faithful, and He is through and through, all through the Scripture. We see words of God's faithfulness, stories of that we very much live in faith, and that's kind of tied into eventually, in the Old Testament, He says that you live by faith, and eventually that becomes the light inside of us, that we are light bearers. So don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing with that. However, a lot of, when I do these song reviews, I think of who might have a problem with this. How could this be problematic? And in this line, as I don't really have any problem with it, a traditional Jewish person, even a messianic Jewish person, they actually might not like this line. They might not sing this song because of this line. And you've probably, if you're a mainstream Christian person singing these songs of God's faithfulness, you've probably never looked at it like this. But there's an idea that maybe God was kind of just done with the Jewish people. It goes through the exile, and we know He didn't leave them. He was still planning for them through the Messiah. But that's the whole idea of kind of covenant replacement theology with the Jewish people. And so when you talk to a traditional or messianic Jew, I'll kind of sometimes put them both together here in this box, that they might feel like God's faithfulness might have had a stop or an end to it. It might pick up later, but we might be in this empty period where they might argue with you on that one. What about the diaspora? What about the exile? What about regathering of nations to proclaim His people together like that? And depending on your theology, you may argue some of those things. But again, some people that find themselves wanting to sing this song might get a little bit quiet here. And then what about tender mercies? Well, there's a little bit of a similar conversation going on. I think the majority of Christians would say that they feel God's tender mercy. Now, there's many, many times in the Scripture that talk about God's tender mercy. That would be a great study. I'll add that one to the list of something we're going to do in the future. But when you read, let's say, Psalm 40 and many other psalms and places throughout the Scripture, you don't get the idea that this is just something that we automatically get, that this is something that is kind of entitled to us. It's actually more seems, especially when you read this in Hebrew, that it's something that God may choose to bestow, or He might choose to actually hold back at certain times. So when you see it in Scripture, you often see people pleading with these tender mercies, that it's not something automatically given. All right, so now we get to this last line, you have kept every word you've spoken, or you keep every word you have spoken. You say, Ryan, don't go on here. Well, I believe in a dynamic relational God. I say that over and over. And I even did a video on, is it within His nature to change? I believe that God does change. Now, God doesn't lie. God is sovereign. God is omnipotent. Everything. God is the very essence of holiness. So what God does defines holiness. So when we look at this, there's many places in Scripture where we kind of see this dynamic idea. Maybe Moses in Exodus 32 or 1 Samuel 15, God's regret of King Saul. Then we have Nineveh. And I could go on and list quite a few here. But my point is that because God is God, he actually, some way out of our human comprehension, could actually have the power to change something he said within his realm. Wow, I'm just going to let you chew on that one for a little bit. Do I have a problem with this being stated this way? I really don't. I don't want to nitpick every single thing, and it's really small, and I think all three of these statements I generally agree with. I can sing them without any problem at all, but it does bring up some great theological questions within the Scripture that we love. So then we get to Listen and Obey, and this is where this song just finished beautifully. There is a little bit of a straining going on here. I would have liked to have, as I said earlier, seen a little more straining within the writing of it, of, working through maybe the pain. They kind of started out that way, pain in vain. I would have liked the words to have actually wrestled with some of these things, but then in the end, they kind of come back to this idea that God is God. It's the finish of the book of Job. It's childlike faith. How all of these things in the end we might struggle with, but in the end we need to affirm that God is God. And it goes on to say, all your ways are higher, so much greater than we know. And the bridge is very similar to that. The same affirmations with continued great word plays kind of going on back and forth on honor, power, wisdom, promise. I love how this is crafted. I mean, it's just extremely eloquently done. And I hate to say it, but we don't see music written this way much anymore. I mean, maybe it's because I'm an Old Testament person and I love the way that Hebrew tells these stories of reiteration and all the word plays built in. But this is really done well. All right, so in the end, it's a really well done song. And maybe I'm giving the authors too much credit here. I don't think so. I mean, they have really done a fantastic job working the puzzle in an Old Testament-like fashion to come up with not only a song that lyrically is right on and really challenging, but musically it's an amazing song too. It just has a great flow and I love to sing it. There's also not even a hint of Reformed theology. Can I just say thank you for that? Love what you guys are doing. Love how you brought this song to us, and I'm excited to try to welcome it to the rest of the world. May God bless you and keep you.